You never think a few extra seconds could cost a life, until you're standing there, screaming at a locked gate, watching flashing red lights helplessly stuck outside. All because of one petty woman and her obsession with control. You don't realize how fast normal can slip into something dangerous, not until it's too late. I live in a quiet neighborhood. Well, it used to be quiet, before Karen became head of the HOA. At first, it was small stuff. Complaints about unauthorized lawn furniture, notes about kids being too loud, the kind of things you roll your eyes at and move on, but something about that power. It got to her, like flipping a switch. And once she had control over the gate to our private road, that's when things turned ugly. We already had a working gate system, electronic, coded, smooth. But Karen called. A surprise emergency meeting no one asked for. She ranted about security breaches, claimed random cars had been snooping around. No proof, just paranoia, or ego. She said we needed tighter control. No one took her seriously. We thought it was just more noise, until the day I saw a chain on the main entrance. A thick industrial one, wound through the gate's metal bars like it was guarding a prison, and a brand new padlock. Shiny, obnoxious, ridiculous. I remember stopping my car that morning, staring at it in disbelief. It wasn't just locked, it was sealed. The keypad was covered. The auto-opening feature had been disabled. No one was informed. No email. No heads up. Just a chain. Like we were inmates in our own neighborhood. I called the HOA line. No answer. Later that day, a neighbor told me Karen had the only key. It's for our protection, she told them apparently. Only I decide who comes in. That's when I felt the first ripple of fear. I didn't say anything at first. I figured she'd get bored of her little stunt. I told myself, this'll blow over in a week. But a week turned into 2. Then a month. And the chain stayed. Packages stopped arriving on time. Visitors couldn't get in without calling a resident to come unlock it. If Karen picked up, her phone. One night, a DoorDash driver just gave up and left my food on the sidewalk. I didn't blame him. No one wants to deal with fortress walls and power-hungry suburban tyrants. But it wasn't about food or convenience. It was about the principle. The way she had done it. Quiet, alone, unapproved. She didn't ask. She decided. Every day I passed that gate, I felt angrier. Not just at the chain, but at the way no one seemed to fight it. Some neighbors didn't want drama. Some were scared of her, and some just didn't care. But I cared, because I knew my father's health wasn't great, and if something happened, I needed help to get in, or out. Fast. That chain felt like a threat. But no one was listening. So I tried to keep calm. Tried to pretend it wasn't as serious as it felt. Until the day I heard the sirens. But that comes later. What stuck with me before that, what made everything sting more, was how smug Karen was about it. She'd walk her little dog right past the gate, keys swinging in her hand like trophies. If you asked her about it, she'd smile like you were a fool. It's just a chain, she'd say. Nothing wrong with being a little safer. But it wasn't about safety. It was about control. About the way she lit up when someone had to call her to get in. About how she'd wait. Sometimes 5, 10 minutes. Just to prove a point. One evening, I watched from my window as an Amazon driver pleaded with her. He had 5 more deliveries that night. She refused to unlock it because his van didn't look familiar. She made him call the customer, prove his ID, and even then, she took her time. Like she was the queen of the gate, and the rest of us were lucky to live in her kingdom. I started sleeping with my phone at my side, just in case something happened to Dad. I started timing how long it took to get through the gate without the code. I knew it wasn't enough. I could feel it in my gut. Karen had turned our neighborhood into her own little empire, and she ruled it with a padlock. I wish I'd said something louder, pushed harder, made a scene. But back then, it felt like one of those HOA annoyances you learned to live with. Just another suburban power trip. No one thinks a padlock can become life or death. Not until it's too late. It happened on a Tuesday, late afternoon. I remember the way the sunlight poured through the kitchen window, warm, peaceful, like any other day. My dad was sitting in his usual chair watching the game on low volume, sipping on a glass of water. I was cooking dinner, half listening, thinking about nothing in particular. Then came the sound. A dull thump. I turned around, and he was slumped over, glass shattered on the floor. His lips were moving, but no sound came out. His hand clutched at the side of the chair, then slowly dropped. I don't remember reaching the phone. I just remember the feeling. That kind of panic that doesn't even feel like panic. It feels like ice pouring into your spine. I called 911, gave them our address, begged them to hurry. They told me help was on the way, and for a moment, I believed that was enough. I did everything I could. Got him on the floor, checked his pulse, barely there. Tried to keep him awake. Whispered his name over and over, like it might help anchor him here, to this moment, to this life. Then I heard the sirens. Relief. That desperate, shaky kind of hope when you think, they made it. He's going to be okay. But then I realized something. The sirens weren't getting closer. They stopped. Outside the gate. I bolted to the front door, ran down the driveway. That's when I saw it. The ambulance, lights flashing, parked just beyond the entrance. But the gate wasn't open. The chain was still wrapped around it. The padlock was still there. Nothing had changed. I waved, screamed, pointed. The paramedics were out of the truck. One of them tried the keypad. It blinked red. He shook his head. The other was already on the phone, probably trying dispatch. I ran to the gate, my hands wrapping around the chain, yanking with everything I had. Nothing. I called Karen. Straight to voicemail. I called again. Still voicemail. I ran to her house. 3 streets over. Banged on the door until my fists hurt. No answer. The only sound was her stupid wind chimes clinking gently in the breeze, like nothing in the world was wrong. Back at the gate, the paramedics were arguing with someone on the phone. I could hear pieces through the bars. They needed authorization. They needed the lock off. They needed to get through now. My dad was inside. I was stuck outside. The ambulance, the help I had begged for, was 10 feet from me. 10 feet, and completely useless. A neighbor came out, tried using his garage opener. Nothing. Another tried calling Karen too. No luck. One woman sobbed into her phone, trying to explain to dispatch what was happening. There's a gate. It's padlocked. Yes. Manually. No, we don't have access. Minutes passed. Then more. The paramedics finally made a call, grabbed their bags, jumped the fence, ran toward the house. I met them halfway, breathless, trying to explain as I led them inside. But it had been too long. I could see it on their faces the second they knelt beside him. They worked on him anyway. They tried. I tried. But something inside me already knew. The moment the sirens stopped, the moment that gate didn't open. That's when the clock started running out. That chain stole time, and time stole everything else. They loaded his body into the stretcher and wheeled him back out the way they came. On foot, because the ambulance still couldn't get through. I stood in the driveway, hands shaking, watching the sun dip lower, in the sky. The lights were still flashing, but it all felt so quiet now. So cruel. And that chain, it was still there. Untouched. Proud. Defiant. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the chair my dad had fallen from. I didn't cry. Not yet. I was too numb. Too stunned. Like the world had tilted slightly off balance and no one else had noticed. Then Karen called. She left a voicemail. Cheerful. Hollow. Hi, I saw I missed a few calls. Everything okay? I didn't call back, because I didn't trust myself to speak without screaming. Neighbors started talking the next day. Whispers at first, then louder. Word got around fast. Someone's husband dead. Ambulance couldn't get in, locked gate. Karen's chain. Some defended her. Said she meant well. Said she didn't know. But most weren't buying it anymore. They saw what I saw. The danger in her obsession with control. And me? I sat in silence, phone in hand, replaying the moment I saw that ambulance stuck on the other side. Stuck because of a decision no one agreed to. Stuck because one woman thought her rules mattered more than anyone else's life. I kept thinking, what if I had cut that chain myself? What if I hadn't waited? What if I'd just broken the gate open weeks ago, when I first felt that fear in my gut? But I didn't. I waited. I followed the rules. And now my father was gone. The morning after the funeral, I didn't open the blinds. The house was quiet in that new, unnatural way, not just silent, emptied. My dad's slippers were still by the couch, his mug still sat on the end table, but he was gone. Everyone says, time heals. But that's a lie. What time really does is settle the dust. The pain doesn't vanish. It just gets quieter until it shows up again in places you don't expect. A song, a smell, a gate creaking open. Or in my case, a woman walking past my house, humming like nothing ever happened. Karen. She had the nerve to nod at me. Didn't even stop. Just gave me that same smug glance like she was above it all. Like she still owned this neighborhood. Like my dad wasn't. Dead because of her chain. That was the moment I changed. I didn't cry after that. I didn't break down. I got angry, and then I got to work. I pulled up the HOA bylaws. Every page, every line, highlighted every rule she had broken. I found the clause about unauthorized alterations to security infrastructure. Found the paragraph that said all emergency services must have unhindered access at all times. Found her signature on old meeting notes, acknowledging those rules. I printed it all. Then I went door to door. People were hesitant at first. Nervous. This was the kind of neighborhood where folks like to grumble behind closed doors but never stand up. But I wasn't asking for complaints. I was giving facts. And when I told them the full story, when I explained how long the ambulance had been stuck, when I said the word minutes, their expressions changed. Minutes. That's what it came down to. One man got tears in his eyes. His wife had heart problems. Another woman pulled me aside and said her father used a walker. What if he'd fallen? What if they needed help? What if next time, it was them? That's when the signatures started flowing. I called an emergency meeting. Karen tried to shut it down. She said I didn't have authorization. She said I was being emotional. She said, we all grieve in different ways. No. This wasn't about grief anymore. This was about accountability. The meeting was held in the community center. Packed. People standing in the back. Neighbors who hadn't spoken to each other in years, suddenly showing up with clipboards, timelines, screenshots of texts Karen had ignored. I didn't yell. I didn't have to. I read the report from the paramedics. I showed the timestamp from the 911 call. I played the voicemail Karen left me, cheerful and oblivious, hours after my father died. And then I placed the padlock on the table in front of everyone. The very same one that had held that gate shut. For once, Karen didn't speak. Someone in the crowd asked what would have happened if she'd been on vacation. Another neighbor stood up and said, "You put all of us at risk. For what? To feel important?" A vote was called. It was unanimous. Karen was removed. I thought that would bring closure, but it didn't. Not completely. Because nothing I did could bring him back. Nothing could undo those minutes. That chain. That choice. But I wasn't done. The next day, I had the chain cut down. I personally unlocked the padlock and threw it into the trash. I restored the electronic keypad. And I made sure every local, fire station, police unit, and ambulance service had direct access from that day forward. Codes, maps, emergency override info. Everything. I didn't want anyone else to suffer like I did. Not in my neighborhood. Not ever again. Weeks passed. The house still felt too quiet. But I started to breathe easier. I began to walk outside without that weight on my chest. Neighbors started waving, talking. Something changed. Not just in the rules, in us. We stopped, letting things slide. Stopped shrugging off the little tyrannies that make a place feel less like home and more like a prison. And Karen? She moved. Some said she couldn't handle the fallout. Some said she was forced out. I didn't ask. I didn't care. The last time I saw her, she was loading boxes into the back of a truck. No more gate keys, no more title, just a bitter woman, swallowed by the consequences of her own choices. I stood on my porch and watched her leave. Didn't wave, didn't smile. I just turned and went back inside. The gate still opens easily now. No chain, no lock, no delays. Just an open path, exactly how it should have been all along. And sometimes, when I walk by it, I slow down. Not because I'm stuck in the past, but because I remember. I remember that control, when taken too far, becomes cruelty. I remember that silence, in the face of danger, becomes complicity. And I remember that sometimes, the smallest things, like a chain on a gate, can have the heaviest weight in the world. And I'll never let anyone forget that again.